Hello and welcome back to All Booked Up. Today we are going to be doing a top 5 video, as you can probably tell from the title of this video. It is going to be my top 5 fantasy standalones. Okay, you may consider some of these books on here a cheat. You may think this is a perfectly legitimate list. I don't really mind. If you think I've cheated, that's fine, but I am going to say these are my top 5 fantasy standalone books of all time. By standalone, I mean there is no direct sequel currently out or really intended in the near future. Okay, one of these I know there has been the idea of a sequel proposed, but it looks like it's not going to happen at least anytime soon. So we will keep an eye out for that. But currently, I'm saying that fits onto this list still. So in at number 5 is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Now you might scream at me, this is part of the Cosmere, this isn't a standalone. To that I would say, you've kind of got a point, but this completely works as a standalone in my eyes. You don't need to know anything else about the Cosmere. I think this is a perfect entry point into the Cosmere. And to be honest with you, it is one of my favourite Cosmere books. I would certainly have it in my top 3. I think it could possibly be my favourite book in the entire Cosmere. For those of you who don't know, I imagine most of you will, this is a story about 2 sisters in a world where the magic is based very much on colours. It is an extremely colourful world if you compare it to, say, Mistborn, another Cosmere series, which is very bleak. This is super colourful, and the basic premise is that one of these sisters is to be married off to the God King of a neighbouring country. Her father decides not to send her, but to send her sister. And basically we see what unfolds from there. I think this is a very, very solid fantasy standalone. I think the characters we get introduced to are wonderful. I think Ciri is a good character. I think Vivenna is great. Alongside of that, we also follow one of the gods in this court of the gods in this neighbouring country. He's called Lightsong, and he is one of the comedic characters that I think Brandon Sanderson has actually nailed. I know lots of people don't like Brandon's humour. I know for lots of people, they think he misses the mark with different characters who are trying to be comic relief. I think Lightsong is one of his better efforts at a comedic character. I think he is funny and sarcastic and self-deprecating, and I'm a big fan of Lightsong. So yeah, I think he does that incredibly well. It also introduces us to other very interesting characters, including a sentient sword who is hilarious. So yeah, I think character-wise, this is great. It's a twisty and turny tale. There's a particular twist that just hurt me, and you feel like you should see it coming, but you don't. And I think, yeah, it's just a very, very solid fantasy standalone novel, and I really enjoy it. On to number 4. This is by Susanna Clarke. This is Piranesi. Now, I read this literally last month. I read this at the end of March. It is a very short novel, and I think the less you know going in, the more you're going to enjoy this novel. It's about 250 pages. To give you a super quick synopsis that's not going to tell you too much, we are following a character who his world is basically a house. And by that I mean a big, think classical Roman architecture style house. It is full of hallways and vestibules. It's full of classical statues all over the place. And he is one of 2 people alive in this world. And throughout these halls, there are tides of water that flow and sort of come up and down in different places. And that's basically all I want to tell you. It's told through his journal entries. You've probably seen me talk about it in a wrap-up or elsewhere. Do yourself a favour and read this novel. It is amazingly good. It is just really, really well written, and I absolutely adore it. That's my number 4. Into the top 3. So at number 3, this was a real close battle. This is going to be The Lions of Arsan by Guy Gavriel Kay. Now, The Lions of Arsan is barely fantasy, I would argue. So I think it is fantasy because it is set in a secondary world. Okay, that is basically the one element of it that is going to be fantasy. There's a very, very, very minor mystical, magical thing that happens, but it is incredibly low magic. This entire world is incredibly low magic. I'm going to say here that I think Guy Gavriel Kay is really the king of standalone fantasy. He writes so many books that are standalone and that explore different things, and I think he does it incredibly well. The Lions of Arsan is sort of an alternate world based upon the Spanish wars, when there was the conflict between the Christians and the Moors. So there is a whole historical undertext here for the story that Guy Gavriel Kay tells. We are following a female doctor as she, as a third religion that is kind of an analogue for the Jews, is living in this alternate sort of style Spain. Really here, Guy Gavriel Kay, as he does in many of his books, works with incredible amounts of theming. So in The Lions of Arsan, I do really enjoy some of our characters. There are a couple that are just wonderful. Some of the soldiers in this are brilliant, but where it really stands out is how Guy Gavriel Kay deals with themes and deals with difficult topics. So it handles the idea of religion, religious tolerance. It deals with nationalism and identity, and I think all of these it explores incredibly, incredibly well. This, along with my next pick in this list, I would say are things that you really, really should read if you are into your fantasy, particularly if you like or can manage and stomach a more classical feeling fantasy. Prose can feel quite literary as well, and I think that is a really good thing for me. I love the way Guy Gavriel Kay uses his words and his sentences, how it's not just what he says, but it's how he says it. But I know for some people that is tricky and they might struggle with that. So your mileage may vary. I absolutely love Guy Gavriel Kay's prose. I think it's absolutely wonderful, but I know it's probably not for everybody. Number 2 on this list, much of the same things could be said for as number 3 on this list. This one is going to be Guy Gavriel Kay again. This time it is going to be Tagana. Tagana was the first Guy Gavriel Kay I read. I really, depending on what day you asked me, this and The Lions of Arsan could be switched. I really don't know sometimes which I would prefer. Tagana definitely has a slightly more fantastical bent to it. There is obvious and overt magic that happens in this book, much more so than you see in Lions. The concept of Tagana is that there is a warlord who has come in, a sorcerer from a different continent, and he's come into this peninsula. This peninsula is very reminiscent of Renaissance Italy. Now, when he took charge of this peninsula, he essentially eradicated one of the countries from the map. And not only from the map, but he eradicated it from the people's memories. Those people who lived on this peninsula have no memory of this place existing. With this, Guy Gavriel Kay again looks at some very interesting themes. He looks at identity and nationality again, like he does in Lions. He looks at what it is to have an aim and to follow that aim and follow that quest for decades. And what it does to you if you are bearing this grudge for that amount of time, especially when you have to be in close proximity to the person you bear the grudge against. This is, for me, an absolute wonderful tale. Again, the prose is beautiful. It's not perfect. I don't necessarily love the way Guy Gavriel Kay deals with some of the relationships here, but realistically, it is a very, very well-written book. And I think if you really want to explore those themes of memory and identity, Tagana is the best place to do it. And now we get to my number 1. Now, this is where some of you might accuse me of cheating. Number 1 is Lord of the Rings. Now, I hear you screaming, Lord of the Rings is a trilogy. Yeah, is it? If you'd tell me it was a trilogy and put it in your series, I'd be fine with that. For me personally, it was intended as a singular book. It was intended as a single tome. I know it didn't quite come out that way, but for me, as Tolkien saw it, this is a single standalone book. And for me, it is the best fantasy standalone that has ever been written. If you have only ever seen the movies and you've never read the book, I implore you, please give it a go. I know some people struggle with the style, and I know some people don't like how the way it's written, and the words that are used is a fight for people. I know that the first part of it, the Fellowship of the Ring particularly, can be a bit of a struggle for people who are just getting into this style, and the plot doesn't move as fast as you might like, especially compared to the movies. However, this book is just absolutely beautiful. The themes of found family, the themes of good versus evil, the cost of doing the right thing are just brilliant. You don't need me to tell you how good Lord of the Rings is. I'm sure there are plenty of other people on the internet who will do that much better than me. But I will say, for me, this is the best fantasy standalone out there at the minute. I hope that's been really helpful. I hope that's given you some ideas of what I enjoy as a reader and a reviewer. And I hope that it has given you some recommendations to jump into between some of the massive, chunky fantasy series that we can get to read as well. If you like this video, don't forget to like, feel free to subscribe, and hopefully I will see you again soon.